Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Quake Pro League as we head into our third series of the day between psygib and dooi. And I think we have to agree here, Flea, that this is probably going to be one of the most methodical matchups we'll have, especially with these two. You know, dooi, I would probably say the most defensive, not just most defensive player in Americas, but probably the entire region. We know we've got other players as well, like Dramis, Base, but we know players like Dramis and Base normally play on their terms more rather than just being a bit passive. But dooi can be very, very passive, and I think with psygib, with how he plays more calculated, it could be a lot of slow matchups and maybe quite a few maps where there could be in between one or two frags apiece.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be one of the closest series we're seeing today. I saw someone in chat during the break ask, is this a game to skip? No, absolutely not. This could be one of the tightest, most interesting games we're going to see all day, because historically speaking, these two have always gone head-to-head against each other and made it incredibly close. Back during the Quake World Championships, the Stage 4 finals, it was in the end dooi who beat psygib, but both games came down to a single frag. And just a few weeks before that, during Stage 4 on its own, it went the other way around. psygib came out on top, but again, really, really close maps every single time. So as you mentioned, this is going to be one to keep your eyes on.
Yeah, both these players kind of play it like chess in some ways, because dooi, with a player like him, you have to be a player who can adapt very quickly, you know, and not just like flank or anything like that, but in terms of knowing doi's rotations and how it actually try and plays the game out as a whole. It's a very, very difficult opponent and definitely one of the hardest, because I would say very, very few players in the Americas region can, you know, get a huge lead or maybe get a huge scoreline against a player like dooi, because he won't let it happen. He'll make every frag impossible to get, and he's going to be very, very hard to kill. The only other player is probably Rafa and possibly to hang, maybe Chain, depending on circumstances. But even then, Chain last week struggled a little bit against dooi. I see dooi as one of those nemesis players, you know, even if he's top half or the bottom half of the Americas leaderboard, anyone who goes up against him really does have a tough time.
Yeah, because he has a very unique play style. He plays on his own terms and will never take an engagement that he is just completely comfortable in. So for him, it really doesn't matter if he wins the map by a single point. If it goes to a 1-0 scoreline in the end, that's completely fine by him. He doesn't care. He's an extremely focused player, very methodical, really solid at reading his opponent, and psygib is going to have to find a way to work around that.
Yeah, psygib is the sort of player who is quite calculated, does leave traps, but how can you do that against a player who's so defensive who won't even walk into the area where the traps are in the first place? You know, it's a very, very difficult. But psygib, he had a very good run last season. We know throughout a lot of the stages he's had some decent placements, some bad placements here and there, but he's been very consistent across the board. And psygib, we always see him on that top half of the Americas region every single time without fail. Always shows that great level of consistency. But, you know, if this is dooi we're talking about, it could be a slow map, maybe some slow games here and there. We know what dooi can do, but psygib is again another person who can be quite hard to kill at times. And especially with psygib, he's one of the better players in the Americas region where his combat skills is next to none.
Yeah, psygib just has to also play his own game, and he can't get baited into following or letting dooi set the pace of the game. One of the things that psygib is most well known for is that this man is a brawler. He likes to just take these big fights using the rockets and the shotgun, two weapons that he's extremely competent with. But if dooi denies him those abilities, then that might end up getting a bit frustrating, and he might want to jump the gun, try to force the situation when things really aren't in his favor. So psygib, he has to stick to his own gun, play his own plans, and just make the situations happen that work for him.
Cool. I was going to say, before we actually look into more of their styles of play as they are as players, have a look at the picks and bans to see what these two will be playing on going into the next series. And as you can see, the first pick will be on Ruins, the second one being on Blood Covenant, and the third one, last but not least, will be on Corrupted Keep. But we see on Ruins, we've got the Ranger versus the Scale Bearer, Nyx versus the Slash. The Slash will be an interesting pick, and as you can see, that dooi is actually banned the Athena because he probably knows that that's probably one of the very few champions that can catch up to him. And then we do have the Visor versus the Strog later on. But what do you think of the pairings here?
Interesting picks. Again, another heavy champion coming out. Dooi playing the Scale Bearer. It's a champion we've seen used to great effect, very successfully so in the past. psygib is gonna have to work hard to get around that. Now, of course, Ranger is actually a pretty decent counter to the Scale Bearer. If that Colossus bull rushes at you, using the orb can do a lot of damage, and you can just orb straight on through and avoid and shut down that bull rush ability completely. So pretty decent counter pick. It's also going to help him out a fair bit of Ruins of Sarnath, since it does have a decent amount of verticality that you can use the orb to get around on. Second map, then Blood Covenant. Two fast light champions. Nyx can make use of the verticality a bit more. She has the wall jump, so she can easily get across from Railgun to Bridge or from Rockets over to the Catwalk. A lot of little jumps you can make use of there. Whereas Dooi, he's got just the horizontal mobility, the straight up velocity, one of the fastest champions in the game. We saw it previously, right? Effortless made such good use once he got that momentum going, so let's see if Dooi can do the same. And then the final map, Corrupted Keep. Strog, another crouch slider rather, from Dooi, going up against Visor, so that's once again mobility versus information on psygib's end.
And you can see as well, not even from the map choices, but from the champion picks Dooi has, like, you know, for the second map, okay, I know Blood Covenant, Athena is actually gets banned quite often. It's probably one of the most common picks there. But he always selects champions where either he can easily get away from his opponent and give himself some space, or he bans certain champions which, you know, can catch up to him quite quickly. Of course, with the Athena on Blood Covenant, it's very, very easy to do. And I don't think he's the sort of player who, you know, he wants to have a lot of space to work with before he makes an engagement. But why do you think that is, though, with Dooi Flea? Because we know what Dewey's like. We know when he plays aggressively, he can be very, very good as well, but it's only on rare occurrences when he's on the back foot. Do you feel like Dooi plays that defensively because it's a style he prefers, or do you think it's because maybe he doesn't grind the game enough, but maybe that playing defensively will suit him for the time being?
Oh, I definitely think it's because he prefers to play it that way. And it's also just because he knows that so few other players really do it. If you look at how players tend to play the game in NA, his style is so different that it can really get under players' skin. They are just not prepared, or before he entered the league, there were just no one who played the way that he does. So by bringing that new style, he took a lot of top players off guard, took maps from the very best in the world. So I definitely think that this is entirely intentional, and his champion picks just work that way as well. As you mentioned yourself, he picks champions that allow him to get out of sticky situations, hang on to his lead, and wait for the perfect engagement instead. With that being said, though, we are jumping into the first map of this series, starting off on Dewey's point of view, going up against psygib, or rather psygib's point of view. My mistake, as he's using the Ranger.
That's right, third series of the day, map number 1 between these two, and it's going to be a little bit like chess in certain areas. Depends how Dooi wants to try and play things out, and how quickly and calculated psygib can make his approach onto Dooi and catch him, which is going to be quite a difficult one. But of course, as you can see with the Scale Bearer, is going to be looking to making traps any way possible, especially with the shotgun and the bull rush. But we'll see what happens. It's still early days yet, still into the first minute of the game. Dooi is looking a little bit better in terms of stack. Dooi is just waiting to see if he can at least get the next rail off, which he does. Gets to Harry and will try and go on the charge, but it doesn't matter. As you can see, psygib has already got himself out of there.
I like the delay by psygib right there, not picking up the Mega as soon as the opportunity to, but rather just waiting a bit. Now he knows that if he can steal away the Heavy this time around, he has around 5 seconds to rocket jump or orb up, and he might be able to string together both of the major items. Those are big ifs, of course, but still, it's a tactical decision from psygib to give himself a lot more breathing room. Even if he can't take away Heavy, he kind of prevents Dooi from just stringing together the items himself. Or Dooi actually going hyper aggressively right now. Maybe a bit of a misplay from psygib. The rockets save him this time around, though. I really don't think psygib was expecting Dooi to make it up to the Mega so quickly. He put himself a bit too far backwards, but the rockets were sublime and saved his skin that time around.
Yeah, Dooi is very, very confident, but psygib hasn't really given away too much info and was waiting for him to drop down for that drop down for that Heavy and managed to rail him off, which he does. So he gets a little bit of chip damage, but then again, psygib was baiting out the Mega for a little bit and delays it just a tad. So if he does manage to contest Heavy and get away with it later on, he can go for the Mega straight afterwards. So it looks like the kind of game plan. So this next item is going to be very, very important for both of these players, depending on how well the engagement goes from either side. But dooi just playing on sand for now. Looks like psygib's doing exactly the same. We did say it's going to be a slow start, but then again, probably a slow series. But it is very equivalent to a game like chess. So 2.5 minutes in. Both players have had some big engagements already, but neither player has taken a lead. But as I say, that already doi's gone straight in with the bull rush, decides to back away for now, and is still waiting for that heavy, which will be up in the next 10 seconds.
And that's exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of this matchup, right? The Ranger Orb, excellent counter against the Bull Rush. If he hadn't had that ability available to him, he would have gotten bounced backwards into the air, down the platform, and that would have allowed dooi to do a lot of free damage, but instead it was psygib landing a few of those reduced damage nails and then getting out. dooi cutting Bull Rush short. Good amount of damage being exchanged, no player really getting full control. It's definitely psygib who's dishing out most of the pain, but dooi makes up for that by having the better control of the items as well as the bigger base stack playing heavy champion. A little bit of a trap coming out. psygib actually will commit. LG on LG switches to the shoddy, and it will be psygib taking home the first frag of this matchup. dooi, though, might actually have a good opportunity of getting a kill. Might not have realized that psygib was right below him at the very start.
That was a real shame, and I think that rail earlier did a massive, well, not just the damage, but in terms of map presence and trying to at least go for the trade frag. It didn't happen anyway. But dooi, as I say that, another beautiful rail from him. Had to tie things up 1-1.
Must have been a headshot, I think.
Yeah, it must have been. To be fair, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if it was, considering the amount of damage it done earlier. It's going to get the mega anyway. Goes for the bull rush to see if he can take him down. Just barely misses. Managed to back away with the orb anyway. But you can see psygib is not in a good spot right now. Beautiful LG. A little bit shaky, but hits his target nonetheless. Looking for the spawn. Will not be there. Will be at least the bottom of the heavy. But dooi needs to focus on rehealing and going back to his default stack.
Risky plays from dooi right there with just 50 points of health, extending that far out, looking for damage instead of just holding the top area of the map. Can he even get onto the mega? Beautiful place right there. dooi just dodging the orbs. A bullet hell game for a moment right there as he avoids pretty much all damage, makes his way onto the mega. Good rocket too, that's a chunky amount of damage. And dooi, he knows this. A resident cowboy. Gonna secure himself the heavy as well, and now psygib is on the back foot. This is looking really good for dooi right now. If he can land this rail and just push in with a shotgun, he should secure himself the frag. Misses though, and that's gonna make sure that his opponent gets the mega instead.
Yeah, dooi now's playing so well. He's just calm and calculated like he normally is. Just a little bit more aggressive on the engagements to try and get those frags, which he has done successfully 3 out of 4 times. As dooi now is going to pick up the light, just trying to it's his default stack, which he has done, but he's looking to try and get this heavy, which will do no problem with ease uncontested. So he's going to be laughing at this moment in time. It's going to be seeing if he can try and go for the mega next, because the timing's on cue, but that rail just barely misses. But it doesn't matter anyway. The whole plan was to show that map presence and get that mega, which he has done. And it's looking very, very good for dooi here, Flea. The fact that it can just keep going for the heavy and then for the mega straight afterwards. He has to stack to contest both items. So I feel like psygib here needs to try and do whatever he can to break that cycle.
Indeed. It's good for dooi that he's got this kind of control and that he has that extra stack to work with. Because psygib is still out-damaging him by a fair bit. And that is something that worries me slightly. If dooi loses control, psygib is just dishing out more of the pain. And that could go south real quick for our player from the south himself. Setting up towards the heavy. That stack is helping out nicely, and I think that now we really are starting to see dooi's unique playstyle come out. He just wants to cycle the items, doesn't really want to chase psygib down. See, he turns around. He perfectly content giving up the mega at the first sign of trouble and just runs straight out of the room, doesn't even try to turn around, doesn't even want to contest. Just perfectly content, hanging on to the lead he has, knowing that he's got a stack advantage and that the rotation is still in his favor, but those rockets though! dooi pushing in and still taking 2 bad rockets. He didn't want to go for that engagement at all.
Yeah, a little bit surprised that dooi decided to, well, not only try and continue contesting that heavy, but I think he might have took a little bit less damage than he expected. And even though psygib was just firing those rockets to feed himself information, it was vital information so desperately required, and it really helped him get that next frag. But so far, 2.5 minutes left. If it was any other opponent, I would say that's plenty of time, but it's dooi of all, and it's extremely difficult to try and get a frag off him by no means. But as I say that now, he's only on 45 HP. He could have gone for the chase here. The shotgun comes out, and psygib manages to tie things up here. And I mentioned before that with dooi, normally 2.5 minutes isn't enough, but looks like there's plenty of time for psygib anyway, nonetheless. But look at the shots coming out with the HMG. Even when he was trying to jump up on the light, this is a bad spot for psygib, but psygib gets a beautiful shotgun shot there. Now gets the lead, desperately needed, but now look at this. Psygib needs to try and stay alive and restack if he can, because dooi is going to be absolutely on his case with that rail and the newly formed heavy.
2 points of health lethal, one more bullet, a sliver of damage coming out would have netted psygib the frag, or dooi the frag rather, but it was psygib with the last minute shotgun, last second rather, it came down to that little time to secure himself the frag. Now dooi though, out of position, takes 1-2 bad rails. Just gonna vacate the area, smart decision, knows that he's outgunned, doesn't want to stick around. This could be dooi's though. Oh no, the rocket! psygib's rockets have been phenomenal. Just how he got that previous frag as well, orbing into the room at the same time as hitting a direct, sets him up so nicely. Excellent read as well though. dooi caught out with the railgun. Wrong weapon for that close of an engagement. And it made him eat a lot of damage right there.
Oh, the fact that he took a direct and then the additional damage after those other 2 rockets, it's sad to see, because psygib was literally 1 away from even being taken down, and dooi could have tied things up. Even if he tried to push, maybe it would have been okay, but the rockets, it wasn't because of the damage, it's the reflection on the rocket. The fact that he got pushed back and couldn't really push himself forward into psygib. I had no idea where it could be. It was a great place to stand as well, in terms of being a little bit unorthodox on positioning. But psygib now just needs to play this slow. He's only got 30 seconds left. If he catches him now on spawn, which he has done, then, you know, that's going to cause a little bit of trouble and could tie things up. But psygib, 100 HP, manages to get the mega. So it helps him just a little bit more, and he's going to try and get the heavy too, which he will do. And now I feel like psygib is in too much of a healthy spot. 10 seconds left, and dooi is a little bit out of his depth. But it was a great play from both of these players. psygib played that really well, playing it slow, even though he didn't have to stack. But dooi there, sadly just missing out on the occasion, and psygib winning the first map of the series, 5-3.
I mean, it was as close as expected, right? Could have gone either way until the very final second. dooi, that chase, he had the right idea, but just the execution didn't work out for him, missing a few too many rails to really pressure psygib right there, and every single time his opponent turned another corner, he had some items to work with, and so dooi unable to deal enough to wrap up the frag right there. Now, of course, psygib making good use of that orb as well. I really like the positioning. He was just standing right next to the teleporter, knowing that if dooi comes from the left, I can dip on out that way. If he comes from the right, I can do that. I can even orb straight up to the top part of the map and get out that way. So psygib was really just locking every single part of the map down right there, knowing that he had a plan for every situation. And this was so beautiful. The orb onto the item, the rocket, 100 to the face. dooi, he made the right call. Instead of running, just running into his opponent with the super shotgun, definitely the right course of action. But unfortunately for him, didn't quite work out, not enough damage being done, and that one, yeah, that kind of settled the deal, I feel like.
It does suck a little bit. I feel like with dooi, you need to have very good awareness against him. You need to check all areas. Like, for example, with psygib, when he went down for the heavy, he made sure to shoot a few rockets on the bounce pad just to make sure he wasn't hiding there. He was hiding there, and that was vital enough information for him to then try and contest that heavy. The only problem was just the fact that dooi should have just let him have it and then back away, go for the light if you've got enough time, and then go forth from there. But, you know, a few risky plays from dooi, which we don't normally see. Like, we're normally expecting him to back away. But psygib did exactly what he needed to be done. He needed to be very aware, check all corners, and make sure that dooi isn't on guard on any parts of the map, just to make sure he keeps him at bay. But look at the accuracy, though. 45% for the rail and LG 39%. Not really too bad, considering a lot of the circumstances dooi was in.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, he did manage to do a decent amount of damage, but psygib just dealt more when it really mattered. So map 1, psygib taking home the win. Now map 2, though, could be a different story altogether. Complete change of pace this is going to be. We're jumping into Blood Covenant, where we're going to see the Nyx, played by psygib, go up against the Athena, or rather the Slash, my mistake, played by Dooi. So two very fast, very mobile champions who don't have a lot of stack to work with. So a rail hitting someone like Nyx is going to cripple her far more than a rail landing on, say, a scale bearer, as we just saw. So that could very much change the dynamics of this next matchup.
It's fine. Now, we're used to seeing Athena being played on Blood Covenant all the time, aren't we? Okay,
Yep.
not all the time. I'm probably taking the mick a little bit. Probably about 7 or 8 times out of 10, you normally see her quite played on Blood Covenant. But it's understandable. The verticality of her, especially on a map like Blood Covenant, is incredible. But, you know, like I said before, Dooi wants his own space. He wants to make sure to keep his opponent at bay. And someone playing the Athena is not going to help him in the slightest, even whilst he's playing with with a champion like Slash. So it looks like he's made the right choices. He's got the bounce he wanted. It just depends if this map goes his way. And you know what he's like with the Slash. He does keep himself, you know, in his own space, in that bay. The only problem is, though, what can he do with the Slash here, especially with the Nyx? You know, I think there's going to be some very, you know, not questionable plays, but some not as many risky plays as we would expect in normal matchups in comparison.
Yeah, probably. I think it's very clear that Dooi, you know, we know how he approaches these games. He is not the kind of player to just carelessly jump into a room and let himself get carried away by that Slash momentum. So I think that he's definitely going to keep his foot off the pedal a little bit more than you might expect with some of the other players. But on that note, we are jumping into the match. Both players slightly delaying their items rather, so that there's ultimately not much of a variation between them whatsoever. Good defensive rocket from Dooi. Gonna knock psygib right back down.
Pretty standard so far. You're right with the items. Both opponents normally do delay the items as much as they can, just to put them off guard just that little bit. But because it's part of the meta, both players are going to be expecting each other to be doing that anyway. But both items are almost identical in sync. psygib with that heavy may have a little bit of an advantage depending on if he gets that first shot on off. But this is the problem we see. You know, psygib will be the one looking to try and get that first shot on the board. He'll be listening out to see where Dooi could be. Does have it now, but at this moment in time, Dooi is bouncing everywhere, managed to get from rail to rockets, and is going to see if he can try and wait for psygib's next move, which will be, of course, contesting that heavy any moment now.
psygib doesn't want to make the predictable jump onto the item, knows that will probably open him up to a lot of damage. Ultimately, neither player really hurting the other one. Slight delay now, 5 seconds, that is doable on a fast Athena like Dooi. She could secure one and make it over to the other in time before it even spawns. I love that rocket from psygib, so ambitious. Good read, but just mistiming it ever so slightly. Still though, good positioning. Oh, that rocket, that could have done so much if it didn't hit the wall. But Dooi takes the rail, but of course, heavy machine gun is faster on the reload, doesn't have that much of a cooldown, so was able to retaliate slightly faster and take psygib down on the first map.
Dooi, though, looking quite fresh, looking quite ready, seems to be doing pretty well considering the circumstances at the start. Takes the first rail, but still has that stack advantage. Decides to go back for the mega because he's already taken it earlier on. But perfect opportunity. At least he's made psygib waste that ghost walk, and he can still try and take him down. But he's going to try and prioritize the heavy if he can. He's railable, but only by 1 HP. But it doesn't matter as the heavy does get taken by Dooi, and he is on the hunt to see where he could have been. But knows exactly where he is. He's going to try and jump up and try and finish him if he can. The rocket's looking good, but Doi's only on 1 HP here. Will he be able to survive? Yes, he will. Takes down psygib, extends his lead 2-0, and gets Mega to make matters worse here for psygib.
Yeah, psygib unfortunately still caught out with the railgun in hand. Machine gun, shotgun, anything would have worked as Dooi showed himself. But at 1 point of damage, that's as difficult to hit as 100 when all you've got is a rail to work with at close range. So Dooi extending his lead, determined not to let this map go the same way as the previous one did. Good. Decent amount of damage, getting the read as well. psygib has to evacuate the area. Probably not far enough though. This should be another frag for Dooi. Can he find the angle? Wall jump. Wall jump just barely kept psygib alive, but it won't last too long. Good amount of damage though. psygib had no business hurting dooi that much, but he's still there.
Must be kicking himself a little bit. 40 HP, 1 HP. Like, he's been so close to cleaning up dooi, but dooi every single time scraping at the bottom of the barrel to get these frags. But Rel's not looking too bad, but it's still only on 19 HP, and this is the advantages of the slash. You can pick up all the health falls, but also have the opportunity to try and get away if you can. But it's not looking too good. It did absorb that rail from psygib. It's only on 60 HP. He's still railable by 5. Needs to get something going, which he does do. And at least he managed to pick up the light. Maybe contest the mega, but I'm pretty sure psygib is going to be all over it, as Dewey's just going to play it a little bit more safer than usual.
Dooi must have been happy for psygib to finally miss that rail shot over there, because he just landed so many beautiful shots, lots of pressures applied to Dooi, so he just didn't have much to work with that rocket jump. I think Dooi probably knew, yeah, he figured out that the ghost walk was used simultaneously the moment he heard the rocket being used, but didn't see his opponent fly up onto the bridge. He figured it out, knew that psygib was there, invisible, slowly stalking towards him. Good rocket, perfect read. He's going to secure himself the mega as well. psygib drops down a moment before he can pick up the item. And now Dooi, really strong reactive plays right now. He is just picking up the items, playing his own game, and all the pressure is on psygib. psygib is forced to push out and take these fights, and then Dooi does stuff like that. 2 rails, not easy ones either. 5-0 already, Lethal.
Looking pretty good, isn't he, so far, Flea? You know, against a light champion, his LG and Rail's been looking remarkable. He's been catching him off guard on numerous occasions. And look at that, though, just on an absolute rampage, 6-0. And if psygib wants to try and come back against a player like Dooi at 6-0, good luck, my friend, because, you know, you've got 4.5 minutes left, and it's going to feel like a tall order here, as Dooi could be looking to extend his lead. He's following the Ghost Walk path. Finally managed to find him, but it's a good thing that at least he followed him just for those few seconds so he could get the audio cues for when he reappears. So that was great stuff from Dooi. Great prediction from him. 7-0 now. It's like I said earlier, it's going to be a little bit of a tall order here for psygib to catch up.
I think that was a bit of a desperate and unnecessary use of the Ghost Walk right there from psygib. There comes a point where your health is just so low that even if you can't escape using that ability, there's next to nothing you can do to stack back up. You would need 4 small health bubbles, both of the small armors, to get yourself back in fighting shape. So when you pop the ability with just 5 points of health left, you gotta wonder, what am I really getting out of this even if I survive? So I think that he burned that ability and still ended up going down when he didn't need to, or would have been better off hanging on to it.
psygib is making a go of it. 9 HP's left on, and Dooi once again survives, scraping away with the tail between his legs. It managed to get away, but not this time. And even as I say that, he commits suicide, but, you know, psygib still doesn't get that first frag. So Dewey's just been a little bit of a pain in the backside here for psygib. This is psygib's probably one and only chance now. If he doesn't take him out in the next minute, I think he's going to be in a world of trouble.
And even if psygib can get a frag right now, we know what Dooi is capable of when he plays passive style, right?
Oh,
he
yes.
can just slow the pace down to an absolute crawl. It'll come grinding to a painful halt, and Dooi will just draw out those final minutes and shut down every attempt at a comeback. You can already see it now. Beautiful evasive plays, waiting, not just committing to any side right there, but using that ability so that he had the speed ready when he needed it, and just kind of scouting left, right, what side is my opponent going to come from, and then just making his getaway just like that. Gonna have to do some damage here though. psygib desperate on the push, rail misses. Both layers, I think, railable. Nope. Or
not at all.
super shotgunable, I suppose. Works out just the same, and now with 2 minutes left to go, psygib. I don't really see this happening anymore, Lethal.
No, that's it. That's pretty much done and dusted. If I wanted to make an analogy for Dooi, it's the fact that, like, you know, if he's 7 or 8-0 down, you know, you have a much chance of catching him in like a 2-mile radius of land playing hide and seek. It's like neon impossible, and it's so so damn difficult. It does make every frag extremely difficult, and that's the problem you see. You try and like, he plays a lot of mind games with you. You go back and forth. You don't know whether it could be changing positions or just going to the very far back in any way. But, you know, and that's the other thing as well. At some stage, you'll leave a lot of the items and he'll be there to clean up and collect them as well. It's very, very difficult to comprehend what Dooi could be up to. But then you see players like Rafa and Dahang who play very well against him, especially Rafa, because as a player, you can adapt really well. And if you can damage your opponent very easily, then that's when you're the one who could be walking away with this huge lead. But yeah, against Dooi, it's definitely one of the more difficult ones, to say the least.
It's also interesting to note that it's actually psygib doing a significant amount of damage more than his opponent, around 500 points of damage more than Dooi. Yet it is still the latter who has got a significant frag lead. Dooi just makes it happen when it matters the most, and he had that momentum for several minutes. It made it very difficult for psygib to really get anything done. Even when he did manage to inflict damage onto his opponent, Dooi just kept running with it and floored him. Psygib though, 30 seconds left. He has made a very good effort at mounting a comeback, but we all know that even if he gets one more frag, two more frags, Dooi will just run this till the end of days.
He definitely will, especially with Slash. He's been a little bit faultless here and there. It has created some errors in the last couple of minutes, but I don't think it really matters anyway. You can see from the tail of it, the scoreline was 7-1 at one stage. And against a player like Dooi, it's extremely difficult to make, not even just make a comeback, just claw back in general.
Yeah.
But no, anyway, psygib did a little bit of a comeback here, but like, wasn't really enough. And you can see from the damage too, it's the fact that there's about 700 damage difference between Dooi and psygib. And look at the light armors Dooi took, 29. That's remarkable.
Yep, indeed, good matchup, and this is the first game of the day that we've not seen a 3-0. It's 1-1, all things tied up. It's gonna come down to the final, the decider, the tiebreaker map, which will of course be Corrupted Keep, that we're going to get to in just a few moments' time. What do you think is gonna happen, Lethal? Any predictions for this one?
I feel like psygib on a map like Corrupted Keep gives him more room to actually be able to try and engage Dooi in a lot more, I'd say, positions in comparison, because on maps like Ruins, Blood Covenant, any map which has a large amount of geometry space, it's very difficult to try and clamp down, not just on where Dooi is, but just at least corner him off or try and put any pressure on him. But on a map like Corrupted Keep, that should be more in favour of psygib. He can do what he wants to do the calculated plays he loves to try and make in any way, shape or form. And if he shows that methodical approach and the pressure, then, Dooi should be taken down. But you never know. I could be surprised from what Dooi could come up with on the Corrupted Keep.
Absolutely. Also interesting to see that psygib opted for the Visor. It's a champion you don't see all that often on Corrupted Keep because it is such a small map with pretty predictable and set routes, so you very often can have a pretty good idea of where your opponent is at without needing the piercing sight. Of course, it still gives you a tremendous added value to your plays, helps you out a lot in trying to figure out exactly what your opponent is up to, but still, clearly psygib this time favoring that information over being able to do the kind of raw damage that you would with some of the other champions.
I would say a Visor pick would be good against players like, for example, Dramus, Dooi, Base, the kind of players who won't fight unless it's on their terms. And I think against Dooi, it's probably the best pick he could come out with. I feel like psygib knows what he's in for. He knows what's going to happen. I don't really need to question what's going to happen, but it depends on how Dooi plays and if he changes his style in any way. He won't change it. He'll play very aggressively when he's got the item control and, of course, want to try and make some good rotations around. But psygib knows what he's like when he's on the back foot. So I think Visor is a very good pick as long as he uses the piercing sight quite far away, so he's a little bit out of range. So then at least he can take his time and worry about what kind of flank or how he wants to try and execute some of the engagements he so desperately needs.
Yep, absolutely. And on that note, we are about to load into the third and final map of this series, Corrupted Keep. We've got psygib versus Dooi. psygib won map 1, Dooi took it right back at him in map 2, and now it all comes down to this. Who is going to win this series? We predicted this one right before it started, right? This is going to be a close one. This is not going to be a 3-0. Both of these players, they're going to have to work for it, fight for every inch they can get, and it all is culminating in this final display of skill.
That's right, third series of the day, map number 3, 1-1 between these two. And it's not been as slow as we expected, I would say. Dewey's been pushed to his limits on numerous occasions, but there's certain occasions he kind of had to force out the bouts or the engagements he needed to do. But like you said, map number 3, 1-1 between both these players. We are going to start off with psygib to see what he's going to get up to and use his piercing sight straight away. Find exactly where he is with the LG. Will you have to finish him off? Yes, he will. And gets the first most important frag. For 62 HP, gets to 50, but then the problem is he doesn't clean up Dooi right at the very end. So already things have tied up within the 20-second mark.
It's always interesting to see how these games can just change in a moment, at a moment's notice. We talk about how methodical these players are. Now we get 2 frags in less than 20 seconds, just immediately the brawl. And this is something that psygib loves. So I'm a little concerned about Dooi after that opening. Yes, things are all tied up. He got himself that refrag. But still, he's got to be careful because this is the way that psygib loves to play.
Certainly doesn't. Dooi gets the LG, has the advantage he needs, baiting out for light for the time being to find out if psygib will flank around, but he won't as Dooi decides to pick up from himself. Good bait, nice idea, but psygib did not fall for it nonetheless. But Dooi still holding the defensive angles around the LG room, and as you can see earlier from the heavy machine gun, but look at this, he just managed to get behind him in the end. Some decent damage, not enough to force an engagement out, but this is where Dewey's going to have to decide how he wants to try and flank around. Both LGs come through. Dewey's got a slight edge here, especially with that peak. It's doing so much damage. I don't know how he stayed alive for so long. I think psygib was expecting him to push through at some stage, but it doesn't. And now Dooi decides to go back to his default stack. Going to try and flank through, but it doesn't matter. It's a little bit too late. Did try and contest for the mega late, like I said earlier, but that also means that psygib gets to heavy as well.
And that engagement just shows why people love Stroke and the Peeker on this map. There is no railgun. You've got nothing to instantly take down the Peeker. You either have to wait until she's really close and use the shotgun, or hope for the best with a rocket, and both of those are very inconsistent. So you just have to use machine gun or LG to slowly dig away at the stack while you continue to eat those blast bullets. So very powerful pick for that reason alone, and you saw Dooi use it perfectly, just flying straight up to the ceiling and just raining down from the top. Now psygib, 1 frag in the lead, keeping things pretty close. We know that the score can get out of control and out of hand very quickly on the map that is Corrupted Keep. So small, so easy to snowball in, but for the time being, both players very respectful of each other's capabilities.
psygib just taking his time to see if Dooi does go through, which he does. That rocket was so close to his noggin, but it looks like it's going to be on the chase. Of course he will. psygib got a huge stack. Dooi needs to be really careful and on his toes to exactly what is going to happen. But psygib, once he gets his hourglasses, he can use the piercing sight to find out exactly what he wants to do for the next engagement. And that was a great play. Could easier just drop down instead. Predicted him to go to those bounce pads and drop bottom mid to where the power normally is. But great stuff from him. psygib increases his lead again. Still had enough stack to force out that engagement. He could force out another one here, but it looks like he doesn't spawn in Red Room. Decides that actually he's spawned on the HMG. But even in there, psygib's got to be a little bit careful here. Dooi does have the stack advantage.
Good amount of damage from Dooi there though. Heavy machine gun is basically the replacement, the alternative to the railgun on this map. Good shotgun from Dooi. He knows it too. Out comes the Peeker. Is he going to commit to this fight? Jump on up. Now it looks like psygib does get out alive for the time being. Next major item heavy, spawning in just a few seconds. psygib, all too happy to just leave that up for his opponent. He wants the small resources, the health bubbles, the small green armor.
psygib seems to have a very similar routine as well. He doesn't really go to the rocket area too much apart from now. This is probably the one spot, and even a banana he wasn't really around. But Dooi to expect that as well, because psygib's been hanging around the Red Room and LG Room the entire time. And for him to predict that he's going to go down banana is a massive thing, and like a great way to even be able to predict to that extent. But Dooi now still be able to get some shots off. Still only a couple frags behind, and psygib It's got to be a little bit careful
kamikaze.
here. It's that peeker. Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. psygib is just on his toes right now to try and at least clean up. And yes, he does. Dooi manages to catch up, gets to heavy, has a huge stack, and is definitely going to be on the hunt for psygib now. And psygib again not on a very good spot, but doesn't matter too much anyway, as he's backed away for now, and he's going to see if he can get the next bit ready.
Good decision from Dooi to back out of that one. He knew that psygib had the better stack, he knew that his opponent had the heavy machine gun, so he had no weapon advantage in that engagement, and then finally the positioning favored psygib as well, because he could just stand behind that little ledge, just peek on over it, and do a lot of damage with the heavy machine gun. Things now all tied up. Dooi, good opening rocket, but still, psygib looking pretty stacked. The LG is shaky. Dooi might actually still drop down, and indeed he does. psygib reacts appropriately with the heavy machine gun, the lightning gun, the tracking. Just completely failed Dooi right there. That should have been his frag.
Quite a surprise. psygib doing a lot of damage here, but because he hasn't got the stack to back himself up, he has to leave, sadly. But it doesn't matter, it gets to Mega for now. There's a little bit more damage. He was hoping to try and take him down before the peeker came up to him, but that's not going to be the case, as Dooi just manages to tie things up. But look at this though. He's got the angle. He's going to bait up a light. Just barely dodges the skin of his teeth that last rocket. But now Dooi's going to see if he can try and contest that heavy. He is coming up in the next 5 seconds. Mega's coming up straight afterwards, but decides to prioritize the heavy anyway. But look at this, both these players are so weak, but psygib is the one who comes out on top in that engagement, and now he's going to try and get the Mega, but Dooi actually takes it from him now. But surely Dooi can't survive this. No, he won't, and psygib extends his lead 7-5.
psygib's rockets, extremely powerful. Dooi, just before he managed to get through the teleporter, that last rocket basically did 100 to him. And that allowed psygib to get himself a nice and easy frag. And there definitely is still time. It's Corrupted Keep. One frag can easily be daisy chained into another. Next major item will be Mega. Dooi, he had positioning, but I think he went for the hourglasses to get his ability up a little sooner. And it's going to bite him in the behind as psygib mercilessly closes the gap. LG on point. psygib's aim has just been superior this map, and it's helping him out tremendously.
Yeah, his confidence is looking really good in his ability and his aim. He feels like he can take on any duel against Dooi right now, but the momentum's certainly going more in his favor. The stacks are similar, but Dooi needs to take some risks here. Even though he's got 2.5 minutes, yes, sure, fair enough, he's 2 frags behind. But he needs to get something done. He needs to stop psygib from going any more crazy than he is now. But Dooi, not the best of stacks, but not the worst either. Both of them are very similar, but not until Dooi takes that light. He's going to try and contest the heavy if he can, but he's got to watch out. As psygib is trying to do the exact same thing, but it's too little, too late. And he's going to try and run into him. The peak comes through. He's done a huge amount of damage here. Still hasn't taken him down, but in that process, that gave psygib enough time to pick up that Mega. Dooi's going to try and feint round and catch him off guard, and he has done, and finishes him off nicely. One more frag in between both of these players.
Dooi is playing highly aggressive for these past 3 minutes. That frag that he got before, this one just dropping onto psygib, rocket into shotgun. Extremely ballsy, very aggressive and daring indeed. And of course, when you're a few points down with 2 minutes left on the clock, those decisions just have to be made. Using that mobility nicely in his favor. I love that play. Dropping himself right on the edge, using the peeker to stop psygib from just walking around the corner effortlessly, and then not even just doing damage, but also stealing away the major item. Both players were standing literally half a meter away from each other for a second right there, and not a shot was fired. Dooi, though, a minute left to work with, and he has just been forced to give up the heavy. Looks like he's not even gonna go for Mega as well. Dooi perhaps showing a bit too much respect to psygib right there. That worries me, Lethal. Look at the stack he's up against now. This speaker needs to be good. Okay, 60 points of damage. Could have been a whole lot worse. LG looking mighty fine as well. But he needs more. Just a tiny bit more.
I'm still surprised about the heavy contestation because of the fact that Dooi had a slightly better stack, but I think because psygib had the height advantage, he didn't want to take the risk of going through it in case he takes a huge amount of damage whilst going through. But as you can see, Dooi just needs one more shot and he manages to tie things up. A-Tool, he manages to stabilize for the time, but that's the problem, is the fact that with Dooi, we know what he can be like, and he won't fight until it's on his terms. But psygib is almost going off, but manages to stay along just outside the lava. Vehicle come through, not do as much damage as he desired, but look at psygib. He needs to get away. He tries to trade for the heavy, but the trade comes in. I'm actually gobsmacked that psygib even tried to even contest that, but he is so lucky that both players managed to trade things out. Dooi should have had that no problem, which he did, but psygib had a fantastic shot to pull off behind that. But we will go to sudden death, and next frag will take this series.
psygib just realized that if he just takes nothing right there, he's solo. Dooi would have taken the heavy as well. It's already overtime by then. Dooi would have just chased him down and gotten the frag. He had to make his stand right then and there. Now Dooi has the heavy machine gun that is a weapon that psygib is lacking for the time being. So that long distance damage is going to come exclusively from the Nemesis player. Both players managing to stack up quite nicely. This is the first overtime we've seen all day. This heavy is going to be crucial. It looks like psygib actually has the better positioning. Can he avoid enough damage to secure it as well? Looks like he will. And now Dooi has to get out.
But look at that though, it took the heavy, but the stack's still almost the same. But this could be the last engagement as psygib just barely takes the mega. Dooi has to get out of there. He's not in a good spot. He's hoping that one of the prediction rockets would help out. No, it doesn't. In very weird fashion, psygib takes him out with the tri-bolt at the end. Dooi was hoping that he could probably hide for his life until psygib makes his next move, but that wasn't to be the case. But a very, very close match, exactly what we wanted from the final map of the series. And as you can see, just manages to take it. Very good stuff. psygib, in terms of that trade at the end, was definitely well worth it.
Oh yeah, that was a fun ending to a fun game, to be sure. I love psygib's decision-making process at the end right there. You could clearly see him be like, oh damn, I'm low, probably should get out. Hang on, he's probably lower than I am. I've got the piercing sight, he's stuck around the corner, let's see. Before I jump through this teleporter, can I do something with the tri-bolt? And indeed, the tiniest little tickle is all she wrote. And psygib, 2-1 victory, but as expected, as always the case between these two players, very close games, very hard fought indeed.
Dooi was just being a bit too cautious in that red room. I think he felt like he was so weak that even a long-range shot with a super shotgun will probably do him in, which is, you know, perfectly understandable, which is why he hid around the corner as he did and was hoping that maybe psygib will make the assumption that he actually went elsewhere. But like I said before, as long as you're very aware against Dooi and, you know, not only awareness, but checking all the corners, then you should be fine. psygib did that throughout the entire series. Yeah, sure, he didn't win 3-0, but he won enough to take the entire series and win it 2-1. But Dooi, like I said, is a very, very difficult opponent. And if you don't play calculated and adapt to his play style quicker than anyone else, then that's where some trouble will be in your hands. That second map was actually a good example of that.
Absolutely. I love that you made mention of the long distance shotgun shots, because I don't think I've ever seen a pro player zoom in with the shotgun the way that Dooi did. Dooi repeatedly just zoomed in with the shotgun, which I think is a beautiful thing to do. I love zooming in with many of the weapons as well. So Dooi, brothers in arms there, but unfortunately for him, still fell short. psygib is the one to come out on top. Well played to him, a hard fought but well-deserved victory.
Nothing wrong with being a zoomer, mate. I'm not. I'm far from it, so completely far from it. But it's just one of those things, isn't it? But we still have more series to come. So that was the third series of the day. The next one to come, which will be Tox versus Avik. So don't go anywhere, as we'll be back in the next few minutes.